Now available in paperback and e-readers, Spinsterella Goth Girl Summer. Take a trip into the macabre world of goth modeling in the new millennium in this spooktacular Spinsterella story. Pick up your copy of Spinsterella Goth Girl Summer in paperback and e-readers at Amazon.com and online booksellers everywhere. Better get the coleslaw, y'all, because we're having us a barbecue. A black mother from Maryland has been sentenced to 50 years in prison for shooting her 13-year-old daughter in the neck and then lying to police by saying that an intruder had been responsible for the shooting.
Now at 5 tonight, some new developments in the case of a Prince George's County mother accused of shooting her own daughter. A few hours ago, a judge denied bond for 32-year-old Taleka Brown.
Police say she shot her 13-year-old daughter in the neck during an argument at their Seat Pleasant home. Brown is facing several charges, including first-degree murder. Our Lionel Donovan is live outside the home where this shooting happened, and he brings us the latest. What are we learning right now, Lionel?
Good afternoon, Lorenzo and Leslie. Well, the state's attorney's office says that the teen victim is still currently in stable but critical condition. However, they did say that she was able to get up and walk around a little bit. Now, the attorney's office is also saying that at this point, the immediate concern is making sure that Brown can't stop her daughter from telling the truth.
And while no one thinks that a mother would shoot her very own daughter, no one could conceive of that. These incidents do happen.
Today, 32-year-old Taleka Brown was brought in front of a Prince George's County judge. Brown is accused of shooting her 13-year-old daughter during an argument. Police arrived at Brown's residence on 69th Place in Seat Pleasant just before 5 p.m. Monday. Officers found the teenager near the front door with a gunshot wound to her neck. Court documents say initially, the victim told police that an intruder shot her when she got home from school. But audio from 911 dispatch shows her story didn't match with what Brown told police.
3 hours, I checked the surrounding areas for Walkerville Middle School. I'm not showing any sound of gunshots in that area.
Copy that. Yeah, we spoke with a few neighbors also. They didn't hear anything. Mom is advising that she arrived home from Walkerville Middle School like this. She came home, she was already bleeding and apparently had a gunshot wound to the back of her neck. But it did not happen at this location, apparently.
Once the teenager was taken to the hospital, she told investigators that her mother told her to lie about what happened and confessed that after their altercation, she saw her mother holding a gun. Investigators concluded that Brown pulled the trigger. In court, the prosecution revealed that Brown left the teen's father a voicemail this morning, trying to influence her daughter. The judge decided that Brown would be held without bond to keep that from happening.
It's her mother. She's going to listen to her mother. And so we don't want her to be tainted in any way by the pressure.
Now, Leslie and Lorenzo, the most serious charge that Brown is facing, first-degree attempted murder, carries a maximum sentence of life in prison. She hasn't put in a plea yet, but she is scheduled to go back into court on October 25th. Now, in regards to that voicemail, the victim's father said that not once throughout the entire voicemail did Brown ask how her daughter is doing. Live in Prince George's County, Lionel Donovan, WUSA 9.
Boy, this whole thing just seemed inconceivable, Lionel, thinking about this little girl as she recovers from both the physical wounds and the wounds of knowing that she was allegedly hurt so deeply by her own mom.
Now, according to reports, 36-year-old Taleka C. Brown got into a confrontation with her 13-year-old daughter in their Seat Pleasant, Maryland home. And as they got into this confrontation, it eventually escalated into an argument, and the 13-year-old daughter was looking to leave the home. And as she was looking to leave the home, that's where Taleka C. Brown then pulled out a firearm and allegedly shot her daughter in the neck as she was walking down the stairs. And as her daughter was shot in the neck, as she was coming down those stairs. This is where Taleka C. Brown then looked to cover up the crime by instructing her wounded daughter to lie and tell police that she was shot by an intruder who had broken in. However, police did their own investigation of the home and found that there was no evidence of a break-in, and neighbors also confirmed this, and 911 dispatchers also confirmed that there was no crime that took place. And eventually, after confronting Taleka Brown's 13-year-old daughter, they then got her to admit that the only person in the home with her was her mother. And after she told the police that her mother was the one who shot her, police then took her into custody and then charged Taleka C. Brown with first-degree attempted murder, first-degree child abuse, assault, and a firearms offense, and eventually, after getting a conviction, then sentenced Taleka C. Brown to 50 years in prison. Now, the police in Maryland see this as an isolated incident between a black mother and her daughter. However, when I take a critical examination of the actions Taleka C. Brown was convicted of, it definitely fits within the pattern and profile of feminist indoctrinated women that I talk about in my book, The Woman Crisis, and also fits within the pattern and profile of the paradigm of failure I talk about as related to the 70% of black women who are single. Now, it's clear to me that Taleka C. Brown is possibly one of these black women out here who possibly came from a home that was part of a cycle of abuse, and as part of that cycle of abuse, she possibly grew up to become one of these children of the corn, and as a child of the corn, grew up like a stalk with no sense of structure or order, and learned a dysfunctional model as related to parenting, similar to what we see as related to the Medea character in the Tyler Perry movies. And like the Medea character in the Tyler Perry movies, basically this woman believes that using acts of extreme violence are a way to discipline a child, and believes that by going out here and using these extreme methods, they can go out here and influence the behavior of a child to what they call act right. Unfortunately, the way she was parenting basically comes from a place of complete dysfunction. Now, this whole way of parenting basically is rooted from the legacy of slavery, where many black women learned how to just treat people not like a human being from the slave master, who basically dehumanized them by using extreme methods of abuse like horse whips and bull whips and even all other sorts of humiliation, as detailed in Tariq Nasheed's Buck Breaking documentary. And what happened was that this culture of abuse was passed on from generation to generation and passed on as a method of effective parenting. And as it was passed on as a method of effective parenting in some black households, this became a way of life for many of these black women, where they learned not to have any regard for any people in their household or people in their family. And that's what basically led to this woman not even seeing her daughter as a human being, to say, hey, yeah, my child is 13 years old. My child is an adolescent. This is how children act at this time, because they're testing boundaries and they're rebelling against the rules. And as they rebel against the rules, this is just something that's part of the whole process of growing up. That's what a healthy parent understands. But when it comes down to these women who grew up with this whole dysfunctional culture that they learned from slavery, what happens with these women is that the minute this child begins to show any sort of resistance, they want to meet that resistance with extreme violence, the same way the slave master met resistance with extreme violence. And that's where this woman believed that it was okay to pull a firearm on your own child, and believed that it was justified in pulling that firearm on her own child. Again, this is a 13-year-old child that she pulled this firearm on and looked to fire this firearm at. And that's where this woman's whole actions and behavior escalate to the point where we see that this is an extreme form of abuse. This was not a mother showing love to a child, but showing cruelty to a child, because pulling a firearm on a child, that's just cruel to do. And it's cruel to do that to a child because, again, a child doesn't understand about the way the world works, doesn't understand the rules of the world, how it works. But when it comes down to this mother, it shows she didn't understand how the world worked as related to parenting. And as a result, she wound up teaching a culture of abuse to her daughter. And sadly, as she continued the cycle of abuse as related to parenting her daughter, she wound up doing harm not only physically to her daughter by shooting her, but doing damage as related to teaching her this culture that led to her daughter winding up growing up possibly to become another child of the corn, growing up like a stalk without any sort of proper structure or order, and continuing the cycle of chaos as related to the culture of modern black women. That's what I sadly see happening here as related to the case of Taleka C. Brown. Basically, this woman in crisis turned her daughter into a woman in crisis like her, and if there is no intervention from the father or a licensed counselor and therapist to deal with this daughter's whole issues, she will sadly wind up going out here and perpetuating the cycle of abuse once more if she goes out here and has a relationship with either a man or a woman, depending on how she goes. That's the whole most troubling thing as related to this whole situation between this mother and daughter. And what's really sad, again, is not only is this mother going to prison for 50 years and this daughter won't have her mother in her life, but the daughter basically has learned a whole dysfunctional culture, a dysfunctional culture of violence that I would say is rooted in the legacy of slavery, because only in the legacy of slavery were black women taught to not see another person as a human being. And that's where they get this idea that of going out here and abusing people that they have relationships with, whether it be the man that they get involved with and they have issues with him and they do things like destroy his property, like cutting up his clothes or breaking things like a PlayStation that he likes. Again, these extreme acts come from her not seeing and regarding another person as a human being. And what's really troubling about this whole case is that this woman didn't even see her own child as a human being. That's how deeply depraved this woman had become. She didn't even see her own child as a person who she needed to show love to or any sort of understanding, because any healthy parent would understand, okay, yeah, 13-year-old child is going to go out here and be disrespectful in some cases, be belligerent, but that's where you have to go out here and show them the line as related to your authority. And as you show them the line as related to that authority, it's from a place of love, not from a place of extreme violence. That's what a healthy parent would do. But sadly, this woman didn't know how to do this. And as she didn't know how to do this, again, just wound up hurting her daughter, not only physically, but mentally and emotionally. And that whole cycle may further get compounded as the mother basically is now going to be a part of the prison system, where she will be in the under the authority of the COs and under the authority of the social pecking order of Betty, Martha, Big Lou, and Ms. Bubbles. And basically what's going to happen to this woman is she's going to wind up getting turned out by all those women as they trade her for all the items of the commissary, like the Little Debbie snack cakes, ramen noodles, packets of Crystal Light lemonade, packets of Crystal Light tea, Keef coffee, Taster's Choice coffee, off-brand lemon lime drink, off-brand grape drink, off-brand orange drink, off-brand Oreo cookies, off-brand duplex cookies, off-brand vanilla wafers, off-brand ginger snaps, Hunt snack pack puddings, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle pies. Y'all know the list. Basically, that's the final fate of what we would call this a mother. Basically, this woman going to jail for the rest of her life, and if there is no intervention in the case of this daughter, she will follow her mother down the road to the paradigm of failure and wind up a woman in crisis. That's the thing that I am more concerned about, because what we see here again is the legacy of violence from the slave master being passed on. That's what we see in those Tyler Perry Medea movies when we see Medea pulling out that gun. Again, that's not how human beings deal with conflict constructively, and that's not a model for dealing with conflict constructively. No, healthy people understand, okay, yeah, my child wants to rebel, but this is where I gotta show them a boundary in a more constructive way, because the way I parent this child will be the difference between this child growing up to become a healthy woman or a woman in crisis. And that's what we see here in this whole tragic case. Again, a tragic case because the mother started teaching her daughter dysfunction, and then we see her continuing to try to continue teaching her dysfunction by teaching her, okay, when you commit a crime, you go out here and lie to the police. But now she's learned that if you lie to the police, there are consequences for that, and the consequences are severe, because now this daughter doesn't have a mother in her life anymore. And if there's no family intervention, sadly, what's going to happen with this girl is she's going to wind up on the road to becoming another tragic case of a woman in crisis, and another one of the 70% of black women who are single, all because of the dysfunctional family she possibly came from. Now, if you want to learn how to identify the behavior of a woman in crisis, or learn about the paradigm of failure that basically destroys the lives of many black women, you can pick up my books, The Woman Crisis and Why 70% of Black Women Are Single, on Amazon.com in paperback and Kindle format. You can also find Why 70% of Black Women Are Single and The Woman Crisis at other online booksellers like Google Play, Barnes & Noble, and big box retailers like Walmart and Target. And if you want to see me make more videos talking about the woman crisis, you can drop a donation to the Patreon, the PayPal, or the Cash App by clicking the links in the description box. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe. Now available in paperback and e-readers, Spinsterella. Discover the dark side of love in this goth and lovely romance with Spinsterella. Get Spinsterella in paperback and e-readers at your favorite online bookseller today. Now available in paperback and e-readers, Isis, Runway of Doom. The goddess next door struts her stuff on the catwalk to take on a runway of rogues in this action-packed all-new Isis series adventure. Get your copy of Isis, Runway of Doom at Amazon.com and online booksellers everywhere. Now available in paperback and Kindle Unlimited, Esteem a New Woman. The devilish diva starts on the road to becoming a new creature in Christ in this all-new Esteem series adventure. Get your copy of Esteem a New Woman at Amazon.com in paperback and Kindle Unlimited today. Now available in paperback and e-readers, John Haynes, An Offer He Can't Refuse. The man who rules the world gets a job offer he can't refuse in this action-packed all-new John Haynes series adventure. Get your copy of John Haynes, An Offer He Can't Refuse at Amazon.com and other online booksellers. Support Black-owned and Black-operated digital broadcast media. www.niceradionetwork.com. Nice Radio Network, broadcasting 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.